Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We have a very special guest today, former Marine, Trump attorney, author, Christina Bobb. How's it going?
Hey, Dan. Thanks so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Sure. I can't remember if that was the same background you used when you were on Drinking Bros, because I would have made I would have made fun of you for having a lighthouse behind you.
Well, this is where I live. This is my neighborhood. But it probably was something like this. Yeah.
So did you take this picture and then put it?
No. No. I bought it.
And where is your neighborhood exactly? Tell me.
This is Jupiter, Florida.
Give me your street address.
That's actually out there. You can find it.
Oh boy.
No, I'm in Jupiter, Florida, in Palm Beach County, not too far from Mar-a-Lago.
That's a pretty nice place to be. I like it there.
Yeah, not a bad place.
I mean, if I wasn't in honestly, I'm in Texas for media stuff now because it wasn't like we moved before COVID, so it wasn't like it is now in Florida where there's a lot of media stuff going on there. But
yeah. Texas is a great place to be.
It's hot and well, no, it's a different. There's no breeze coming off the ocean here. You know what I mean? It's
True.
Just hot.
And we have the beach.
Yeah.
And lighthouses that you can make fun of.
Well, I will. Give me time. So what did you do in the Marine Corps? I don't know if we discussed that one.
Yeah, I was a judge advocate. So for most of my time, I was a criminal defense attorney. And then I served in Afghanistan, did operational law there, and the military mix, and then got out and did civil litigation and went back into the military. So mostly criminal defense and operational law.
Wait, you went back into the military. What was that like?
It was great, actually, because I not deployed. I mobilized as a reservist to Germany. So I was in Germany for a year and a half doing operational law stuff, which was awesome. I switched because I had been doing criminal defense and operational law in the Marine Corps, got out, loved being an attorney, and then went into civil litigation and realized that civil litigation is not quite as fun as operational law.
Sure.
And so I was like, maybe I love the national security aspect of things. So I went back.
So we've had Patel on before, but I don't know that we ever really, I don't know that we jumped in. Tell the audience what operational law is, just for,
Sure. So it's anytime, at least I was doing it with the military, with the Marine Corps. So anytime there are military operations going on, what can you do? What can you legally do? Geneva Convention and rule of law, rule of armed conflict issues. What kind of status of forces agreements do we have in place in the local area? What can do our military members ever leave the base? Like I was in Germany, of course, we went out in town, but we didn't do that in Afghanistan. Those types of differences. What are the troops allowed to do? That mostly, being in Afghanistan, it was mostly kinetic operation, military operation.
Sure, yeah. So. But now it's getting, the kinetic operations are kind of have wound down for the most part, right?
Yeah.
Except for the fact that we're for some reason bombing Yemen every 12 seconds.
Right.
But as far as status agreements, that's going to be something that comes more into public focus now because of Taiwan, right? I'm not sure that people really have a good handle, like the American public has a good handle on what the rules are and what our responsibilities are vis-a-vis the agreements we've signed. Can you kind of break that down a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, you raise a really good point. And I think there might be some gray areas now, especially with the White House changing their position on some. I shouldn't say they haven't officially changed their position, but it appears to me that the Biden administration is a lot more amenable to China. And certainly that will come into play with Taiwan. But, I would have to take a look at the specific status of forces agreement of what we can and cannot do, our personnel on the ground in Taiwan. But certainly that's something that we need to be paying close attention to in the coming days as there appears to be some movement taking place there.
And what we do have a TRA, the Taiwan's Relations Act, right? So we do have like the official policy of the United States is that we will provide Taiwan with defensive weapons, whatever the fuck that means. You know what I mean? Like somehow you're like, these are defensive M4s. You can't use these for kinetic operations. Like, right. What is it? The gun turn off? You know what I mean? If you try to use it kinetically. Okay. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me. But it is hard to tell if the White House is changing positions or if the national security apparatus is just covering up for stupid shit that Biden has said, right? It's hard to tell sometimes.
Yeah, it is very hard to tell. And so I don't know where they will come down on some of these questions. I think there's a lot of things that are up in the air as far as our positions abroad. And personally, it makes me nervous having Joe Biden in the White House because I don't think he's going to take a strong stance to protect any Americans that are overseas. So, we'll have to see how it plays out.
Yeah, that hasn't been, it's only been the case with liberal presidents, with Obama and Biden, right? Before, like Clinton didn't have any problem dropping bombs on people. Say what you want about his, he kind of got scared with the whole Mogadishu thing, which understandably so, there's a lot of pressure to get out of there afterwards. But for the most part, it's only kind of a recent thing. And I wonder if it isn't some kind of, how it is in politics with the Overton window and then just the reactionary nature of, right versus left. If the neocon fucking war machine has created a leftist organization or like a leftist national security apparatus that's just scared to do anything, right?
Well, and I think they're scared to be or not scared. I think they're intentionally not being honest with the public. So we've got, it used to be that presidents liked showing force. They liked to present themselves as very strong and, America is strong. And then you get Obama in there with, this wishy-washy limp wrist approach to the military and not wanting to acknowledge the fact that they actually used drone strikes quite a bit. And they were actually quite lethal, but they didn't want to talk about it. And so and then they'll shroud it under the guise of national security, when in fact they're actually maneuvering their own political gain without telling, not just the American people, without telling the world, without being open and honest and transparent with everybody that we're dealing with. And so it really does not just threaten us as a nation, but individual Americans who are overseas, whether you're there on behalf of the government or you're a tourist overseas, it threatens our position because we don't know what kind of dealings they're doing with these foreign nations. And I might think, I'll use Canada as an example because it's benign, but I assume we have a great relationship with Canada. And if something were to happen to me in Canada, I could go to the American embassy. Okay, we all have these assumptions, but when we're talking about countries that are not Canada, you can't necessarily make those assumptions anymore because they're not being open and transparent with us.
No, and we're at the point now. I mean, look, you can be tough on the international stage if you're willing to back it up. Because if somebody's willing to call your bluff, right? So Russia was very clearly ready to call our bluff with regard to, so there's this old Roman principle called civis Romanus, right? And it basically means it's something that you would say. It was almost like the ichthus fish for early first century Christians. Okay. Civis Romanus meant I'm a Roman citizen. And the point of saying it was if you are, from Gaul or some other neighboring country, Macedonia or something like that, and you fuck with me, the entire weight of the Roman military is going to come fuck you up. That was the whole point of it, right? Right. So you can do that stuff, but you have to be willing to back it up. And it seems like the only time we were willing to back it up was when, a WNBA player was arrested, which is kind of weird, right? I mean, it sends the wrong message. And
they left the Marine behind. Like, oh my gosh. And I'm sorry, I don't remember his name off the top of my head, but there was a Marine in custody too, and they didn't even bother to take him back.
Yeah. It sends the wrong message, right? But I think it is the result of just ineffectual leadership. And it's the same thing that happened during the Obama administration as well. Now, he did kill 4,500 civilians, women and children mostly, with drone strikes. And he also deported more people than all previous presidents combined. I don't recall that on the campaign flyers, but that's what happened. It's kind of weird to see how dichotomous the messaging versus the action is on the left these days.
Yeah, what they're actually doing versus what they're telling us they're doing, they don't match.
Right.
So that's a problem.
Do you think people are kind of? It's hard to tell because we keep having these reports. This week we learned what we already knew, but we learned for an absolute fact that Fauci and his crew, probably Francis Collins as well, definitely subverted federal policy and funded gain of function research, and that the first people who got COVID were definitely people who worked at that lab in Wuhan. We know that for a fact now. The whole somebody's eating bat soup bullshit or whatever the fuck they were talking about before is all nonsense. The Haldeman report, obviously, which is probably a little bit more in your lane, has been, I guess, not even declassified, because it was never classified in the first place, just released to the public, which should have been the case in the first place, right?
Yeah, why they sealed it in the first place is still a question I've got. But
one of the most damning parts of the Haldeman report that I've read so far is that man, maybe you can break this down more for the audience, because you probably know more about it than I do. But in Georgia, the Dominion voting machines, according to the report, can be hacked. Like there has been a security flaw identified. Doesn't necessarily mean it was, but it definitely can be. There's no question about that now. And then for some reason, the voting commission has decided not to repair it or install a security patch until after the next election. I don't understand that. We're still we're a year and 4 months away from the next election. I don't understand why you wouldn't repair it now.
Yeah, well, that's a really great question. And I've got a similar question about a lot of other problems and issues we saw surrounding the election, particularly in 2020, before 2022, and now 2024 coming up. But yeah, the Georgia election officials have basically said, oh, we're going to wait until after the next election. I mean, why? Why on earth would you do that, other than you have some other interest than the security of your election? So I think everybody that is taking that position in a position of authority in Georgia needs to be investigated. Why on earth are they trying to make Georgia's elections hackable? Why are they intentionally leaving them open to manipulation? The report even goes further and says they can be manipulated and leave no trace. You don't know that they've been changed. So, yeah, I would like to know why.
It is very bizarre to me. And another thing that's very bizarre to me is that Brian Kemp, who is the governor of Georgia, Republican, and then Katie Hobbs, who is now the governor of Arizona, who's a Democrat, in two very critical states for any federal election, both came from being Secretary of State, which in a state, for those who don't know, during federal elections, or any statewide election, but federal elections especially, the Secretary of State is basically the governing authority, the person who adjudicates the election commission and rules and all this other stuff, right? It's very bizarre to me that we see two people from the same background in these positions. And maybe I'm reading into that. Maybe that is a normal thing.
No, I think you're exactly right. And Katie Hobbs went so far. So one of the counties, I think it was Mojave or Cochise in Arizona, the commissioners, throughout the process of the election, they have to certify the election results, right? We've all heard about that ad nauseum from 2020. And these county commissioners said, hey, the books don't match. The poll books don't match with our records. There's a problem. We need to investigate more. Katie Hobbs, as the Secretary of State, sent a letter to those commissioners threatening them with criminal prosecution, because in Arizona, election crimes are referred to the Attorney General from the Secretary of State. The law basically says the Secretary of State needs to take a look and see if these are actually potential crimes, and then refer the criminal charges to the Attorney General, who can prosecute. So Katie Hobbs is a criminal authority as the Secretary of State for election crimes in Arizona at this time. And she sends a letter to the commissioners saying, if you don't, I'm paraphrasing, if you don't certify me as the winner, I am referring you for criminal prosecution. She said that. And, naturally. And so they certified in duress, and they said, we are under duress. We're being threatened with criminal prosecution. These books don't match. They should not be certified, but we have to certify them because we're being threatened with criminal prosecution. That's how she got elected in Arizona.
Yeah, that's bizarre, right? I mean, I don't know that I'm sure it's happened before, because
it has, where you have the Secretary of State overseeing an election, and people have challenged that, and courts have said, there's a potential conflict of interest, but there's not necessarily an actual conflict of interest, and you have to prove that they were, acting criminally or whatever. But I don't know how you get around something like that, with Katie Hobbs threatening people with criminal prosecution if they don't certify her as the winner.
Yeah, you can look, absent direct evidence of something, the way people behave around questions are often really telling. But let's get to the direct stuff. So You've got a book, Stealing Your Vote. It's out now, right?
Yeah, it's out.
Okay. And is it on Amazon, or did they kick you off
Yeah,
Amazon?
no, they have not kicked me off. Actually, they went so far. There were so many people trying to write bad reviews that they blocked the bad reviews and said you have to be a verified purchaser. So they've actually helped me out a little bit.
Wow. Imagine
I know. Wow.
So tell me about the book, generally speaking, but I want to know from what is the claim being made in the book, and what is the supporting evidence for that? Because I think there's there's a lot of smoke. There's no question about that. I'm just curious what the fire is.
Yeah. So the way I like to summarize the book is that Democrats cheated and Republicans covered it up. This is very much a bipartisan problem. And it's the story of my investigation. I was an investigative reporter at the time, and I take you through my experiences of all the witnesses I talked to and everybody, and all of the evidence that I found. And I think I found a lot of it. But there's several different ways, and it really is, as Joe Biden said, a coordinated effort for voter fraud, voter suppression, whatever you want to call it. And they will manipulate voter rolls. There's a lot of evidence of problems in the voter rolls. There's a lot of evidence of problems, particularly, who would have thought that you could just print as many ballots as you want? And this whole idea of now elections take longer than just election day to count. That's why they're doing it. And we saw this happen with Kari Lake. Even after 66% of the machines in Republican areas went down on election day for Kari Lake, they still needed several more days to tally the votes. In my opinion, I think they needed time to print more ballots. They have ballot on demand printers now where they can just print as many ballots as they want. They have access to the voter rolls. They can see who has and hasn't voted. And if they can inflate their voter rolls, they can literally print out the difference. So for example, in Wisconsin, there's 3.5 million citizens over the age of 18 in Wisconsin. So you would think you would have approximately 3.5 million voters. They have 7 million people on their voter roll. They literally, even if every single voter in Wisconsin voted for Donald Trump, they still have enough people on the voter roll to change the outcome of the election. So these are all things that absolutely need to be cleaned up. Why are we tolerating them? And anyway, I'll walk you through, examples of like everyday folks, teachers and, city workers that were volunteering to work the election and what they saw and what they witnessed. And it ends with a very positive note. I do believe Donald Trump ends up in the White House in 2025. But it takes all of us getting involved. And I try to encourage people how you get involved, because the election is secured from the bottom up. We have to secure it at the local precincts. And if everybody secures their precinct in their county, then we'll have a secure election. We've been waiting long enough, and it clearly hasn't come from the top down.
I don't want to spoil too much of the book, but who are these additional voters? Who are the other 3.5 million voters on the voter roll? Are they college students or who is it?
No, from what I can tell, they're not actual people. Like some of the reports that came out in Wisconsin show the way that they do their voter roll. It's not chronological. It doesn't go 1 through 7 million. They use wingdings, they use symbols. So the system itself is not auditable because it doesn't go in any chronological or alphabetical order. So you can't know when you started and when you ended. And that was the finding in this forensic report, was there's no way to know when you get to the end of the Wisconsin voter roll because it doesn't go in any order. And the election officials' response to that was, oh, well, the machines know. We have it run by a machine, and the machine knows if everything's been done or not. And it's like, well, a human needs to be able to verify that this was done properly. So I don't know if they're even real people. You can make up, whatever you want. I know there was a lot of questions about dead voters, and I'm sure we know that there were dead voters that voted. I don't think that was the huge difference maker in 2020. I think it was bloating voter rolls, or like in Nevada, anytime you have to go to the DMV for anything, you get married, you change your name, you move, whatever it is that you need to change about your official record, they create a new voter registration for you. So there are people in Nevada with 5 voter registrations for the same person just because they went to the DMV and had to have something changed. You need a new driver's license, whatever it is. So they're just a mess. Honestly, the voter rolls are a complete mess.
Well, even if it's a clerical error on behalf of the government, voting more than once is still a federal crime, right?
That's correct. And in Nevada, so the difference in Nevada between Joe Biden and Donald Trump was about 33,000 votes. And in Nevada, they have verified and confirmed, I got this from the Nevada GOP, that 42,000 people voted twice. So more than the difference in Joe Biden and Donald Trump, there were 42,000 people who voted twice.
Maybe this is a dumb question, but why are we not verifying voters by their social security number? Because there's only one of those.
Not a dumb question at all. I think that's a great idea. I don't know why we're not doing it, other than, to me, the only logical inference is because the people who are controlling the elections right now want to be able to cheat. The people in power want to stay in power, and so they want our elections to be malleable so that they can manipulate them. And it's happening in every state. It's happening in Republican states. And just to put this into perspective, at the time of the 2020 election, when all of this happened, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Arizona, Georgia, those 5 of the contested states, and then you have Nevada and New Mexico that were Democrats. Those 5 states, they're Republican states. They're Republican legislatures. Some of them had Republican secretaries of state, Republican majorities in county offices. So the states that were stolen were Republican states. So everyone likes to wag their finger at Democrats. It was Republicans. And that's why I say Democrats cheated and Republicans covered it up, because we absolutely had the ability to fix this and we didn't.
Yeah, I've said for a very long time that the aristocracy will protect itself before it'll protect any particular principle or even any individual. So that when you said that the Republicans covered it up, do you have any specifics on that, like who and how?
Well, I mean, I can't formally say without an official investigation, but for example, in Wisconsin, the Racine County sheriff there referred criminal charges against the 5 Wisconsin election commissioners, 3 Democrats, 2 Republicans, for election fraud. And they went through, the lieutenant there gave a very, very good explanation of why those commissioners violated that election fraud law. The name of the statute was actually election fraud, and it was in relation to nursing homes and the instructions that they gave. The commissioners were on record in an official hearing saying, if we give this instruction, basically we have to instruct the county clerks to violate the law. And they all said, yeah, well, if we give them this instruction, we're telling them to violate the law. And they literally voted on it. They voted, should we tell the clerks to violate the law? And 5 of the 6 said yes. And so the sheriff refers that to the Racine County District Attorney, who refused to prosecute. Patricia Hansen is a Republican. She just refused to prosecute, said it doesn't matter that they committed election fraud. I'm not going to prosecute it. So that's one example.
Why would, and I'm sure that's common, but a lot of, there's been a lot of that, and the Republicans have been pretty ineffectual for a pretty long time now. I mean, they've been busy mostly generating wealth for the military industrial complex for the last, 25 years. But
you're exactly right.
But why? I mean, is it somebody who just, there's so much social pressure not to be a quote unquote election denier or something like that? Or what is it exactly?
Yeah. I think it's probably different for everybody. I don't know everyone's individual motives, but I think that's part of it. They don't want to be an election denier. They don't want to lose donors. They're corrupt. I do think, and I don't have conclusive proof of this, but just the sense that I get from looking into this is I think there are liberal-leaning organizations that have funded people to run as Republicans who are not actually Republicans. That's probably not going to shock anybody. We have the nickname Rhino, of course, Republican in name only. But I think that was actually a legitimate effort, like an intentional effort to make these Republican areas very, very weak, because voters don't realize that, until these people get into office, they don't know that they're not really Republicans for the most part. So there's some compromise there. I think there's a variety of reasons. The reason that Patricia Hansen gave was she said that she doesn't have jurisdiction to prosecute election fraud in Racine, which clearly is not the case.
What?
But yeah, that's what she said. She said she doesn't have jurisdiction to prosecute those election fraud crimes in Racine. She's the district attorney of Racine County.
And who would have jurisdiction to do that?
Great. Yeah, right? Who is going to do it if not the district attorney? I don't know.
I mean, I guess the Attorney General's office, but...
Yeah. So she's basically saying we can't prosecute election crimes on a local level.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
That doesn't sound right, but what do I know?
No, it's not right.
I always assume when a politician does some shit that doesn't make sense, it's just about their corporate sponsors, to be honest.
Yeah. And that's a very good assessment too. I mean, it's probably all of the above.
Um, yeah. So this tell me what a rhino is exactly. And well, actually, let's back up. Tell me what a Republican is in 2023, because I'm not entirely sure what it is. It's certainly not a person that has conservative values anymore.
Right. Well, I think the Republican Party is being reformed. I think we are going back to our roots, which is the party of Abraham Lincoln. We're the party of freedom, free speech, conservative values. And I think that is being remade. We were not that. I think the MAGA movement is reinstalling that into the Republican Party. A few years ago, around 2020, people were saying, oh, we need a new Republican Party. We need to change parties. The Republican Party itself is getting changed. So I'm confident that we will correct course on our side. I think when all of this is said and done, I think it's the Democrats that are going to have a hard time surviving this. I think they have gone so far left, and the fact that they're trying to normalize pedophilia, I don't know that they can recover from that. Once we actually get, the ship righted, I don't know that Democrats are going to survive this, because normalizing pedophilia, I think people have a problem with that.
Sure. Yeah. So. I mean, I kind of felt like, fucking with kids would be the red line that nobody would cross, you know what I mean? Regardless of your political affiliation. Although, it goes back to the 70s and 80s, to be honest. This great progressive hero, Harvey Milk, was a fucking pedophile, right? I mean, he was fucking like 13, 14-year-old boys in San Francisco all the time. And then, basically the only reason that I guess Josh Brolin shot him in that movie. You know what I mean? Have you seen Milk? I haven't. It kind of very openly discusses all of the weird shit that was going on at the time. And still, like, you're supposed to feel like he's the hero at the end of it. And they named a fucking battleship after him too, right? Or something got named after the guy. At any rate, let's say, but before we get into the rhino thing, I want to ask, if someone were unfamiliar with American politics, how would you define what a Republican is in the best light, right? Like what you want it to be after this Reformation or whatever is happening happens.
Oh, that's a really good question. I wish I were prepared for it. The Republican Party will be very disappointed in me. I would say a Republican is someone that is fiscally conservative, possibly socially conservative, although I think that's something that, I'm curious to see how that changes in this Reformation process. But I would say the fiscal conservative part, I think, is the easiest part to identify. But traditional values, family values, faith, and not just their own religion, but the religion of everybody, goes back to the fundamental principles. Constitutionalist, Bill of Rights, believes in, I would say, a strict reading of the Bill of Rights. I think that's probably how I would define it.
I would focus in on maybe the 9th and 10th Amendments to the Bill of Rights, the ones that limit the scope and size of federal government. And
that's a good point.
I don't think the federal government should even exist, but I might be a bit of a radical. And then what would you say is a rhino? I mean, my general concept of a rhino now is just a neocon from 15 years ago, but it seems like most of them are kind of drifting towards center left at this point, in the Overton window.
Well, I think if we took the rhinos of today and compared them to the Democrats of 30 years ago, they would firmly be Democrats. Some of them are Democrats by today's standard, but rhinos, I would probably lump them into two categories. I would say rhinos are either Republicans who have gotten so soft and squishy that they just kowtow to everything Democrats want because all they're focused on is keeping their seat and keeping their cute little title of whatever office they have. So they don't actually fight for conservative values, and they just go along to get along and lose everything. And then the other way, I think the other category that some rhinos probably fall into is they're actually Democrats who couldn't get elected in their conservative part of the country, so they ran as Republicans.
Like Adam Kinzinger, for example, right?
Right,
Yeah.
right. And Liz Cheney too. I think, but I think they just knew they would never get elected as Democrats, so they ran as Republicans, but they don't actually share Republican values.
Let's pivot a little bit. I want to talk about some of this stuff that's going on with Trump right now.
Yeah.
Can you, from your guys' position, what exactly do you think is going on here? Because a lot of this stuff seems pretty frivolous, frankly. It's the same stuff that goes on with every exiting president for the last 30 years. There's bitching and moaning about this or that and trying to just score political points and stuff like that. But this time and look, Trump is a unicorn in this regard because he garners so much attention. But this time it seems a little bit different. I mean, it seems, I can't tell if they hate him or if they're afraid of him. It's hard to say.
Well, both. I think it's both. I think they hate him because they're afraid of him. President Trump is a true conservative in the sense that you were just describing. He wants a smaller federal government, and the power should belong to the American people, not this crazy political class that is demonizing anybody who disagrees with them. And I think for the first time, earlier we were talking about how it's hard to know what the administration is saying publicly versus what they're doing privately. It doesn't really match. I think in this case, I don't think they can hide it. And I think the American people really do understand exactly what's happening. They are trying to criminalize their political opposition. And by they, I mean the political class. I don't believe that this is a Democrat versus Republican issue, although, some of the policy is, but it's really a establishment versus anti-establishment issue. Donald Trump is absolutely anti-establishment, and the establishment is trying to take him down for it. And they're scared of him because he actually has the ability to take them down. And what I mean by that is he has the ability to win in 2024, despite the fact that they're controlling the government. And that makes them very nervous.
Yeah. A lot of people right now, and campaign season really hasn't started yet. We got a couple more months before it really gets started in earnest, but it's coming pretty soon. And I'm curious. I hear a lot of people, look, you're never going to agree with anybody completely, and nor should you. That would be a very boring world, I think.
Right.
But a lot of folks are concerned that the last time Trump had the opportunity to clean house and quote unquote drain the swamp, that never really happened, right? I mean, the heads of the agencies, the intel community, and the DOJ that butt fucked our country for the last 6 years are still in power today, right? A lot of them are. What would you say to people that have that criticism? I mean, why would we expect he would do something different this time?
I think the difference is now we can all see who everybody is and where they stand. Donald Trump was new to government. He had never worked in government, never been a part of it. And naturally, he had to rely on the RNC and rely on some of these political establishment type organizations to guide him and to give him instruction and teach him on how, not just how government works, but who the players are, right? And why does it matter? And why does one position matter over the other? And so I think he genuinely just believed that he could slide right in and people would be honest with him and give him good advice on who should be where. And we've heard him make remarks about Bill Barr and some of these other leaders that he wishes that he didn't have in his administration at the time. And I think that's the difference now. The difference is not only can everybody in the country see what's actually going on and recognize who these people are, but now so can Donald Trump. Donald Trump is kind of in the same boat as the rest of us, where we didn't know how bad it was, right? We did not realize the extent that this political class has dug its talons into the swamp and just held on to Washington, D.C. for dear life. President Trump has said that openly. He's like, I had no idea how deep the swamp went. So I think the difference is we can see it now. And now he knows how to make that change.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of people are deeply distrustful of institutions now, the medical community and the political class especially. Maybe it's kind of the same general, I guess, overarching feeling that we felt with the financial institutions between 2007 and 2013 or so, towards the end of the Occupy Wall Street movement.
Right.
But that movement ended, right? And nothing got changed. As a matter of fact, the subprime mortgage bundles are still available right now for purchase and for shorting. You can, nothing has changed, right, in our system.
Right.
I'm very curious what you think is the appropriate way for people on the right to react to this current witch hunt against Trump, right? Because I think a lot of the stuff he said during the 2016 election about putting Hillary Clinton in prison and things like that, and then not following through on that afterwards, rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. It certainly rubbed me the wrong way because I think she belongs in prison. And I'm not even a conservative. I'm a libertarian. I don't even think any of this shit. This is a game that I don't even watch. It's like I'm basically commenting on The Bachelor right now. I don't give a fuck about any of this stuff. But she's a goddamn criminal, right? So
yeah.
I wonder what you think about how just the ordinary, conservative person or Republican person, however you want to categorize that, should react, because it does seem like the blustering and all this stuff and threats and everything kind of gets into a tit for tat situation, and it will escalate, right? And the right talked a lot of shit about draining the swamp and doing stuff, and the left is doing it. Not draining the swamp, they're leveraging,
they're building up the swamp.
They're leveraging the power of government against their political opponents, and the right didn't do it. And I don't think, I personally, I don't never necessarily think they should, but one side looks strong and the other side doesn't right now.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair assessment. And I would agree with it. Just to be clear, I have not talked to President Trump on this particular issue, so this is just my thoughts on it. But I completely agree. And I think the concern, I would imagine the concern, I wasn't part of his administration or know him at that time, but I imagine a lot of the concern was, this is the United States of America. We don't prosecute our political opponents. We don't throw our political opponents in jail. That's like third world-esque. We don't do that. And so I think that was the concern. Well, that door's now been open. So, and it wasn't open by us, So, the way I've said it before, and I said this when I was a reporter with One American News, when I was digging into all of the election fraud, we didn't pick this fight. They did, but we'll fight it. And if you're going to force us to fight it, we will fight it. So the way I would encourage conservatives to respond is what they're doing. Make sure you're informed. Make sure you know what you want out of a situation. Tell your elected officials what you want them to do. Make sure you're in touch with your members of Congress, their offices. And, when there's a bill or a lot of this investigation into the Biden family, let your members of Congress know what you want. President Trump is not in office right now, so he's, you can email the campaign, but he can't do anything. But it's important that the American people stay in touch with their state and local leaders, as well as their federal leaders, and make sure that what you want and what you expect to happen is taking place. Because the last thing we need is everyone, either tweeting about it online or grumbling with their friends, but not telling the government. The government's supposed to work for us, so it's important. Keep your government officials informed and let them know how you expect them to act.
Sure. And now let's talk about Hunter Biden a little bit. I don't know that, the stuff that he got charged with yesterday, I don't care about any of that stuff. I don't think it's relevant or consequential to anything political. I mean, it's interesting to see that the president is, using his power to protect his kid, I guess. But who I honestly, I can't imagine, it. If you were to ask me whether I thought if Don Jr. or Eric were indicted on something and Trump was president, if he would just outright pardon them, he 100% would, I think, in my opinion. I'm not asking you to opine on that. So I don't think that's necessarily that out of pocket.
Would.
Yeah. Especially when it's not like when the victim of the crime is the IRS, there is no victim.
Yeah.
Fuck the IRS. The IRS should exist either. But anyways,
right.
It is interesting to see. One, they've sentenced him off schedule, which is interesting, right? I mean, you're more of a defense attorney, but there's
federal sentencing guidelines are, gospel.
Well, sometimes, right? But that I guess that part's interesting, but I don't think it's that big a deal. A lot of people are up in arms about that, but I do wonder from your perspective, do you think that the Republican legislature right now is pursuing the Burisma stuff hard enough? Because it doesn't seem like it is. And then maybe comment on Lauren Boebert filed articles of impeachment yesterday. And I'm not sure if we're there yet on that. I know that there's a limited amount of time to get this done, but anyways, what do you think about that?
I agree with your assessment completely. I think you're completely right. And I also think there's a solid possibility that the Department of Justice filed those charges against Hunter to be able to say, look, we filed charges against him, because they don't want the pressure that's coming of what about espionage, money laundering, all of the stuff related to the political crimes that he facilitated for his father while his father was vice president and possibly still ongoing. They don't want to discuss those facts. And so this probably very much was well, we got to do something, so let's do this, as far as the no, I don't think they're doing enough to go after him. Republicans, what is it about Republicans? But they cave and cower. Honestly, it's a party of cowards. Not all of them. Like I said, I think we're rebuilding that. Lauren Boebert certainly is a fighter who speaks her mind and does what she thinks is right by her constituents. I'm curious to see what happens with her articles of impeachment. I probably share your assessment of, are we there yet, from the standpoint of, we couldn't get 20 Republicans to censure Adam Schiff. You think they're going to impeach Joe Biden? So I think we're there. From my perspective, we're there as far as the evidence and the need and the importance to do it. As far as, do we have enough Republicans with enough backbone to actually do it? We'll see.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I mean, even then, he's not gonna get convicted in the Senate. So I'm not sure now is the right time to do that anyways. Or if it's even, if people will recall, the Republican legislature, the Republican House voted 46 times to overturn Obamacare, with knowing that the Senate wouldn't pass it. It was just a complete waste of fucking time, to be honest. Let's talk about the Schiff thing for a moment. There were 20 people who I don't know why all 20 people voted against this. I know why Thomas Massie did, and I think he's got a good reason to not do it. But I'm curious, you think it's appropriate to fine a sitting congressman $16 million?
Well, I think it's appropriate to take some action. They now, I believe, Rep. Luna is putting something forward to send him to the ethics community, the ethics committee. So something needs to happen to Adam Schiff. And those 20, who knows? They could have come out and said something like, "I would vote yes, but I don't agree with the penalty," or whatever it is. But they didn't do that. They just turned it down. And all of this was taking place as Donald Trump is getting indicted and arraigned. And so you've got the left, who is going full throttle against their political opponent, against us, against the American people, and Democrats like to say, oh, Donald Trump is the leading Republican candidate for 2024. No, he's the leading candidate for 2024, Republican or Democrat. So they've got the leading candidate getting arraigned while Republicans are going, well, I don't know if we should, say Adam Schiff is bad. Like, it's a joke. I think I think they absolutely should have censored him. If they didn't like the penalty, negotiate the penalty and come out and say it should be something else. Fine. But don't vote no. You know what I mean?
Well, my understanding from Massie was that from what he was posting on Twitter is that, well, let me explain why he didn't vote yes.
Yeah,
and let me get your thoughts on that. So it requires to expel a member of Congress, you need a 2/3 vote from the House, right? And you could censure somebody and then fine them to such a degree. And if they can't pay the fine, then the result is they have to leave Congress, right? With just an up or down vote. He feels like it's unconstitutional. And I think I agree with him in that regard. And what he posted on Twitter last week was that there was another censure bill in the works that didn't have the large financial penalty. I haven't seen that yet. Maybe they pivoted and Luna's just going to put send it to the ethics committee or something like that. But the ethics committee can censure without a bill, right? So maybe that's how it gets done. I don't know. But I didn't hear any of the other people say anything about why they did or didn't. You know what I mean? So 19 additional people. And they're not like Thomas Massie is a libertarian and constitutionalist. He wasn't ever going to vote for that with a civil penalty attached to it. I know that. Right. But everybody, all the other ones are not people that I consider to be terribly principled. So it does make you wonder why, that particular group of people didn't get involved in this. Or like you said, be very vocal about like, hey, I don't agree with this penalty, but let's do something because this guy's a cunt.
That's right. And you're exactly right. And that's the problem with the way Republicans are going about this is they just look weak. And when you have Donald Trump getting arraigned and they're not saying anything about why they're just letting Adam Schiff off the hook, the American people are going, who's in control here? Why are we letting a Democrat member of Congress lie to the American people? He threatened and said Don Jr. was going to be in jail, in a certain amount of time or whatever, and say that there were all of these crimes that had been committed that was a knowingly false statement that he threw out there to everybody, to the American public, trying to convince the American public that Trump or his family or these people are bad. And they were blatant lies. It was political propaganda. And then you've got the Republicans, sitting over there twiddling their thumbs, not saying anything. Okay, if you have principled reasons for why he shouldn't be censored or censored in the way that they're going about it, say something, do something. And I'll give Rep. Comer, or Chairman Comer, I should say, credit for doing that in his role as chairman of this oversight committee, because he's informing the public of what's happening, right? He can't do it all by himself, and there's probably many procedural roadblocks to some of the things that Comer would like to do. But he's out in the media all day, every day, telling the American public, this is what we're finding, this is what we're asking for, this is what we're doing. And then he's got to get colleagues who are willing to work with him. Congress doesn't have prosecutorial power, and so it's going to be interesting how they bring that together with, let's say they put this great case together of all of this crime from the Biden crime family. How are they going to prosecute it? Is Biden going to prosecute himself?
Right.
Yeah.
No, definitely not. Right.
Right. So
it's
what are they going to do?
By the way, update on that. Anna's bill is getting reintroduced today, I believe, for vote for censure. It's changed, and according to the Hill, they've got the votes this time, so he will be censured today. In some regard, I don't know what the penalty will be. Usually, there's no actual penalty, I don't think. But.
Right, right, and quite honestly, I think a lot of people assumed that was the last bill too. Is it's just a censure? Like, why can't you censure it?
Right. Yeah. But, well, that's bad messaging on the party's part. And speaking of bad messaging, I know that Comer's out in the media quite a bit, but you cannot have the head of the FBI openly defy you for 3 months and not fucking hold them in contempt.
Very good point.
I mean, that is completely unacceptable.
That's a good point. I completely agree.
But Republicans are bitches. It's just like,
that's
it's so
true too.
And I think some of it is the live and let live attitude. Some of it is like, we're not going to play those games and we want to be above the fray and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
That's, if you're in a gunfight and you're still trying to calm people down, no, you win the fight. Step one is win the fight. Right. That's right. And I think maybe reach down deep and grab whatever's down there and, do your fucking job for once.
Yep.
So I don't know if Biden's going to be alive by the end of this sentence, to be honest, because he's old as shit and he's physically deteriorating rapidly right in front of our eyes. Right.
Yeah.
What do you think happens if he goes down, if he's incapacitated, or if he decides not to run? Who do you think steps in there?
I don't know. They don't have anybody that's viable. So to me, it doesn't really matter who they put into place, because I don't actually think it's about the Democrat candidate. 2024 is Donald Trump versus the political apparatus. They can insert name here. It doesn't matter who they put in. It's Donald Trump versus this political class, this political establishment that has leached itself or burrowed itself into the federal government and is pulling all of the strings and manipulating elections and manipulating power to benefit themselves. And that is what Donald Trump is trying to take down. They'll put in some puppet candidate the same way they did with Joe Biden. I don't think it will be Kamala Harris.
That would be funny, but probably not.
Well, yeah, it'll be someone who doesn't have to wear diapers, and that's what people ask me. Why? Don't you think that Joe Biden is, they're like hiding or doing something nefarious with Joe Biden? And I always say no. Like, if they were going to pick someone, why would they pick someone who needed diapers and can't complete a sentence? To them, it doesn't matter who's in that position. They just need someone's name on the ballot, and then they all manipulate around that person. So this is Donald Trump versus the political machine. That's what 2024 is.
Any chance? I mean, a lot of people think that Gavin Newsom is going to be the guy that steps up, but he's so close to completely ruining California. You know what I mean?
He has already completely ruined California.
Well, no, I mean, he's so close timeline wise. Usually you have to put some distance between yourself and your failures before you can run for federal office like that. I kind of assumed that he was going to run for the open Senate seat since, you know, Miss Feinstein can't walk.
They might put Newsom in. I mean, he can walk upright. He can probably go up and down stairs by himself. You know, he probably can go to and from the bathroom by himself.
But he looks and acts like a lizard person. Like all of the negative stereotypes about Apollo, even before the tumult of the last 7 or 8 years, he looks like the kind of person that people will be like, I don't know about that guy. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, he's totally like greasy and gross. And you're like, yeah, you definitely can't trust him. Right. Yeah. I mean, yes, that's true. So I don't know who they'll come up with. To me, it doesn't matter. It's all about the machine. It's not. But when I say I don't mean the voting machine, I mean the political machine. So. Yeah,
well, he's definitely trying to garner national attention. I don't know that that's the smart thing to do. If you're him and you're what you consider to be a rising star, it doesn't seem like a good idea to jump into this particular federal election, frankly.
It's not good for anybody to jump into this federal election. I mean, I was a DeSantis supporter. I voted for him for governor. I think he made a huge mistake by jumping into this race. And all of these other candidates that have jumped in on the Republican side, I think they've all made huge mistakes in their career. I think this election is so clearly Donald Trump versus the establishment. Can Donald Trump take down the establishment? And why would you get in the way of that? Why would you get involved in that at all? But, you know,
these political processes happen in every election, though, right? And usually, even when there's not a front runner, somebody does emerge at some point during the primary season, and everybody else gets cabinet positions and or VP, right? I mean, that's kind of how it works. So I kind of
usually, I don't think that that's happening this time around. And again, Donald Trump can, when I expect him to be the next president, and he can arrange a cabinet however he wants. 2024 is a very unique election. I think everybody recognizes that this is different than every other time. So I don't think that is the way to go. My personal assessment, if I wanted a cabinet position, I would not run against him, but who knows?
And do you any sense of who might be running as Trump's VP? Because it certainly isn't going to be Mike Pence.
It's not going to be Mike Pence. I don't know. I haven't talked to him about it. I don't have any idea. I think there's a lot of really great MAGA patriots out there that could potentially be in the running, but he hasn't said anything to me about it.
And you have no like who would you choose?
I'm forgetting the guy's name right now. I don't know if you guys can Google it quickly. The lieutenant governor of North Carolina, I think. I really like him. I heard him speak one time. I thought, wow, he's good. He's got some potential.
Mark Robinson.
I think, is he a big black guy?
Yeah.
He was great. I liked him a lot.
I kind of thought it might be Tim Scott just because Trump is so loud, and Tim Scott is the opposite of that. You know what I mean? He doesn't really need to win South Carolina though, so it's not the best strategic move to pick somebody like that.
Right. And Tim Scott, I think recently has come out a little bit more antagonistic about, well, you know, we can read the news articles, but sure. I think anyone taking on Donald Trump at this point probably is not. I don't know. The president can do whatever he wants. My belief is that if they're taking him on, they're taking him on. And it's not a friendly thing, but I don't know.
Well, it's never particularly friendly, right? And primaries, I don't think. I mean, it's always there's always a bit of a dust up. Well,
the problem with this crowd is they're all hoping Donald Trump gets taken down by the establishment. Why else would you run? I mean, Donald Trump is literally beating the next candidate by 40 points. Why on earth would you take him on? And it's because they're all running against each other, hoping that the swamp is actually successful at removing Donald Trump from the race. That's why they're all running. And so to have a group of competitors who are all hoping that somebody else takes you out so they can compete against each other, I think that's particularly gross, in my opinion. And it's not the traditional, oh, we're all equally running against each other. It's a close race. It's not a close race. It's Donald Trump's race. We all know that. The only way Donald Trump doesn't win, or, in their minds, the only way that he's not the Republican nominee is if the swamp successfully removes him through these criminal charges. And I think it's really gross to be banking your political career hoping that the federal government takes out your political opponent.
So you think when DeSantis, because he's been pretty openly critical of the government going after Trump and calls it a witch hunt and stuff like that, you think he's full of shit?
I do. I really do. Donald Trump got arraigned in Miami. DeSantis is the governor of Miami. Why didn't he go? Why didn't he at least go show support? And it took him several days. And he says, when I'm president, I'll handle this. And, I'll make sure that the Department of Justice doesn't do anything like that. First of all, he's not ever going to be president because Donald Trump's going to be the president. Second of all, it's happening in your state. Why should I believe that you're going to do this at a federal level if you're not taking care of it at a state level? Now, I understand there's a difference between the federal process and the state process, but he's still the governor of the state, and he can still make stronger statements and say, hey, I want to meet with the Department of Justice. I want to know what you're doing in my state. I want to make sure that this isn't an abuse of power happening in my state. He's not doing any of that. He tweets about it. So I'm sorry, I'm unimpressed with his response.
And what do you think? We're getting close to being done here, but what's the message from Trump this year and next year? Well, like the electorate is quite a bit different than it was attitude wise, right? I think a lot of people, I don't think people voted against Trump necessarily because they thought that they were in favor of the establishment. I don't think that's what it was, right? And whatever about voting manipulation and things like that happened. Definitely, all of media and social media were colluding against him as well. And you don't always need to hack machines if you can hack somebody's fucking brain, right?
Right.
Which is always going to be a problem. But it does seem like our collective epistemology in this country is being attacked, and people are starting to notice it. Like, we can't define a fucking woman. Are you kidding me? I feel like women voters are probably the most important block in any given election. White women voters actually are probably the most important. They tend to vote Democrat about 61 to 65%, depending on the election. I wonder what the message is to them specifically, because I think a message about protecting your kids and stuff like that might resonate pretty well. It definitely worked in Loudoun County.
I think absolutely. That's a perfect example. Well, I think the Democrats are making the case for us. They can't define women. All we have to do is say, we can define women. We can protect your rights. But I think President Trump's message to the nation is a message of hope. And it's a message of, we are taking our nation back. We are restoring freedoms to America. I think Americans can see parental rights are at stake. I mean, California, I think the legislature just passed. I don't know if it's been signed into law, but at least the fact that it even hit the floor of the California legislature, that parents can lose custody of their children if they don't affirm the gender that their child wants. I mean, that's bizarre to think you can lose your child. If your child goes to school every day and the second grade teacher convinces your boy that he's a girl, you can lose custody of your child if you don't support this crazy idea. So I think parents are starting to wake up and be concerned about their kids. So certainly that's an issue, but I don't think President Trump would ever campaign on fear tactics. It's empowering. Everything about Donald Trump is empowering. And we're returning power back to the people. The people should run the government, not the other way around. And quite honestly, the left is making his case for them. The crazier they get, the more people go, you know what, maybe Donald Trump wasn't so crazy.
Yeah, I agree. That's definitely the case. I feel like there are a lot of people out there who agree with that assessment. If there was one piece of advice I could give him, it would be to talk more about the issues than other people, because a lot of these people he talks about don't deserve the airtime, frankly. You know what I mean?
Very good point. All right,
they're just a bunch of fucking retards. So before we get out of here, tell me about, once more, recap the book, tell people where they can find it, and tell them where they can find you and the other stuff that you do.
Yeah, thanks. It's called Stealing Your Vote, The Inside Story of the 2020 Election and What It Means for 2024. You can get it on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, wherever books are sold. You can find me on Instagram and Twitter at Christina_Bobb and ChristinaBobb.com. I'm out there. So.
And what media stuff are you doing right now? Are you still reporting, or are you just kind of authoring, doing tours? What are you doing?
Yeah, I do here and there. It's kind of sporadic. I do the rallies, of course, with RSBN. I'll cover those, and then kind of hit and miss. For the time being, maybe there's something in the works, but for the time being, it's just kind of sporadic.
Oh wow, that's very cryptic. Thanks. Yeah, this has been a really good conversation.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, anytime. I appreciate all the information and the insight and dodging some of my questions. I appreciate that as well.
I didn't mean to. I don't
No,
think
it's
so.
fine. It's your job to do that. It's fine. Yeah, thanks a lot, and we'll stay tuned to see what else develops over the next year and a half or so as all this shit plays out. Thank you for coming today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.